Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /IDontWorkHereLady, where you know the deal. Karens harass people who aren't even employees and demand to be served. And in this episode, we've got bosses who won't let employees quit, a Karen who throws a mega tantrum over KETCHUP, and one OP who has a very important government job tells the story about the time a low-level Karen gets demoted for giving him orders. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I was listening to some stories lately, and I was reminded of this one. In my second year of university, I got this job at a local interior design studio that specialized in custom-made closets. It was also a retail boutique that sold like IKEA stuff, but this was expensive and bougie and obviously way nicer quality. I basically was pushing my resume everywhere, and they were the first ones to call back about being a sales associate with them. So it was me, this interior designer, and the owner who was also an interior designer. It's also worth mentioning that I was getting an arts degree, and I have zero background or experience in design or interior decorating. That said, I start working there. The pay's great, and they aren't open late. About 3 months in though, I burn out physically. The job was way above a basic retail position. I was my boss's personal assistant. It actually got to the point where I was doing design work, meeting with clients regularly, doing coffee runs, picking up her daughter, all that jazz. I basically dealt with all the in-store selling plus personal life for her. I worked 8-hour shifts, 6 days a week while being a full-time student. And obviously for some people, it's necessary/doable, but that wasn't what I was looking for. I wasn't a designer or a personal assistant. I wanted casual hours at a retail gig. But whatever though, I resigned. So I hand in my resignation letter, get my last paycheck, and get taken off the schedule. So that means I was done, right? Wrong. Well, the following day is the day after my last shift. I get a phone call from my former boss, and she's frantic. My boss says, "Hi, so I just got to the store and why aren't you here? You are very late today. I might have to write you up for being a no-show." At that, I respond and say, "Oh, yesterday was my last shift, remember?" She then says to me, "Well, I thought you would still be here this morning. Why haven't you scheduled XYZ consultations, or done ABC, or unpacked the last shipment of stock? And remember what I told you a few weeks ago about covering for coworker today? She's gone on holidays." I respond, "I only did those things when I was working for you. I no longer work for you." So my boss, not even comprehending, says, "Okay, well, could you please schedule those consultations and drop off some samples to their locations? And if you could also do some measurements while you're there, that would be great." I tell her, "I literally handed you my resignation and I told you why I was quitting." My boss says, I know, but you still need to do those things for me until we find a replacement. I haven't even gotten around to interviewing anyone for your position yet. So if you could please..." I stop her right there and I say, "I'm off the payroll. I do not work for you anymore. You should have looked for somebody while I was working to replace me." She then says, "Yes, but that's besides the point. I need you here today. What you're doing is really unprofessional. You can't get away with this kind of behavior in this business, you know. You will never succeed." Once again, I say to her, "I explained to you why I quit. I'm not at all qualified to do the job you've tasked me with, and I'm not looking for this heavy workload right now. Again, I've explained it to you. Moreover, I don't want to work in this business." She then responds, "This is unacceptable. The girl I'm looking to hire won't even be trained for a while. So until she can take over your position and do everything you can, you are obligated to continue to help me. You can't quit. So you need to come back and..." It's at that point I hung up. She then called me multiple times and she left many voicemails that I just ignored. And then, after she realized I wasn't answering, she kept emailing me. She had to have sent me like 20 emails telling me to pick up my phone. I emailed back, outlining step by step how and why I was no longer her employee and was not obligated to continue working. Well, she wasn't having it, so I end up blocking her email and phone number. She even called my parents' house a few times where I was living, as they were listed as my emergency contacts until we blocked her. After 2 weeks of this, she finally got the point. Some bosses really won't let their employees quit, hey? Like, how many times does one need to say, I don't work here anymore, to really get the point across? Like, it's just so funny how she's like, okay, so I know you don't work here anymore, but you need to keep working here until we find somebody. And thankfully, that's not how things work at all. I'm just glad OP hung up and blocked her because she was giving off psycho boss vibes. Thank goodness she didn't show up at OP's house. So, to preface, I'm a middle-aged guy, serving in a mid-level staff position at one of the top-level government institutions of my country. Compared to the US, think places like the White House or Congress. It's a rather delicate matter politically, so I can't name this institution involved. Also, I live in a non-English speaking country, so here goes. One day about 2 years ago, my boss, who's the department head at the very important government institution I work for, asked for a favor. Could I please help him out and hand-deliver a certain document to the office of another very important government institution? Now, normally, it's not my job to deliver any kind of documents. And besides, I'm sufficiently senior, and that's frankly ridiculous to ask that of me in particular. My boss, of course, knows that. In compensation, my boss offers me to take the rest of the day off if I go drop it off. It was about 11 a.m. on Friday. Now, that was sufficiently tempting, and my boss was nice about it too, so I agreed. Now, this being semi-official business, I could have requested an official government car to ride me VIP style to the other building. But it was a nice summer day, not a cloud in sight. And the building's a half-hour walk from here, so I decide to walk. So I took the document, which was a letter printed from my boss, to a department head at the other building, and I went on my merry way. Arriving at the other building, I called the person's mobile number provided by my boss, and she asked to please drop the letter off at the incoming correspondence desk. I locate the desk, and I'm standing in front of a wooden window. I then knock and say, "Hello, could you please take a document?" The lady who's working there says, "Give it here." I then thank her and say, "Have a nice day." But before I could leave, the lady says, "No, wait, I can't take that document." I ask her, "Why not?" She then says to me, "For us to accept any kind of documents here, they need to be in a sealed and properly addressed envelope." Hearing that, I'm dying a bit inside. How naive of me to imagine it would be this easy. I say to her, "Oh, no problem. Please give me an envelope and I'll put it inside and address it." She then says to me, "What? No. Of course we don't hand out envelopes. Ridiculous. You have to bring your own." I tell her, "Look, my document is already addressed on the first page. It's on official letterhead too, so it's not like you wouldn't know what to do with it." She then tells me, "For us to accept any kind of documents here, they need to be in a sealed and properly addressed envelope." And yes, she really did repeat herself word for word, verbatim. She then shuts the window in my face. I'm just thinking, okay. So I take my document back and I call the person who needs this letter on my cell phone. Upon hearing the name, the lady immediately opens her window back up and she perks up. I say, "The person at the correspondence desk refuses to take this letter because it's not in an envelope. Could someone please come here and take it?" The person tells me, "Yes, of course. I'll send my secretary right away." And hearing that, the lady says, "No, you're lying. Who said I won't take the document? Of course I'll take it. Give it to me right now." The woman actually leans out of her window and tries to snatch the letter out of my hands, to which I say, "Thank you, but I've decided to deliver it myself." So I exit back to the street and I walk around to the front of the building, figuring I'll just meet up with whoever was going to meet me midway. And then I have this idea. Our government-issued IDs are theoretically valid in all federal-level institutions, including this building. So let's put the theory to the test. The RFID chip on my ID only works in my office, so the turnstiles won't open for me automatically. But nothing prevents me from showing it to a guard manually, so to speak. So I walk through the main entrance, and I present my ID to the police officer on guard. They make a great show of inspecting it, and then they open up the visitor's turnstile for me without a word. This is my first time inside the building, actually. I call the person again and ask for directions. She explains where her office is, and I go up there. It's up a flight of stairs, to the left, and suddenly, a young lady runs into me. The young lady asked me, "Are you from very important government institution?" I tell her, yes. She responds, "I'm the secretary. Please give me the letter." I hand it over, and the lady thanks me and says, "Have a nice day." I respond, "You're welcome. Have a nice day." And that was that. I went home to enjoy my Friday afternoon. Just kidding. It wouldn't be an I don't work here lady story, would it? Just as I was about to descend the stairs back down, somebody grabs me by the sleeve of my jacket. I was already stepping down, and that sleeve grab almost made me lose my balance. Fortunately for everyone involved, I managed to stay on my feet and not roll down the stairs. I then turn around, and there is a young lady, well, likely in her 30s really, by all accounts a junior staffer, who we'll call Karen. I take her hand off my sleeve because she's still grabbing it, and I say, "Excuse me?" She then hands me some papers and she says, "Take this." I ask, "What is this?" She says, "It needs to be taken to the very important government institution immediately." I think to myself, so this is what it's about. She heard that I'm from very important government institution, and she wants to use this opportunity to pass some documents with me. Mind you, I do not at this point even realize that this was an I don't work here moment. So I tell her, sure, I can take these papers to very important government institution, but that would be on Monday, if that's all right by you. Karen hearing this says, "I can't believe what I'm hearing." I respond, well, you should, because it's true. She then shouts at me and says, "I can't believe what I'm hearing." Cue the moment of shock, and she goes on and says, "You know that I can take your job away like that, right?" Snapping her fingers in my face. Like that. She then snaps her fingers in my face a second time. Now it dawns on me. This woman thinks I'm a courier working for this building, delivering their documents. I'm actually dressed in a suit and tie, so I have no idea how anyone in their right mind could mistake me for a courier. Karen says, "Do you even know who I am?" Huh? I think to myself, no, and I can't care less, actually. You're an entitled junior staffer whom I'm quite sure I outrank by several pay grades. And I want to note, my civilian rank actually corresponds to that of a military lieutenant colonel. And I only need to flash my very important government ID for you to see that. But I don't say any of that. Suddenly, the immense responsibility of being a representative of the very important government institution weighs down on me. I need to stay professional. Sooner or later, she'll know who I am anyways. I tell Karen, "No, madam, I don't know who you are." She then says to me, "I'm this position of this department of this building. Do you even understand what that means?" Again, I think to myself, oh, I understand, all right. That means that you're a frickin' sergeant major yelling at a lieutenant colonel. I respond to her, "This is probably a misunderstanding of sorts. I do not actually work here. You see, I'm just here." She then interrupts me shouting again, and she says, "I don't effing care. I need these documents at very important government institution right now. Now get to it." Before I could utter out another word, she says, "Don't you effing talk back to me. I'll not only have your job, but your boss's job too." And I think to myself again, that's highly unlikely, because my boss is appointed directly by the chairman of very important government institution and can only be fired by him. And our chairman isn't even appointed by the president of my country, but he's voted into office by my country's parliament. After being nominated by the president, nobody can fire him. But sure, let me play along. So I tell Karen, "Got it, I'll take your documents." She says, "You'd better." And I say, though, like I said, that would be on Monday. She then tells me, "Don't you dare, you take them right now." And you can probably guess how this goes. I don't take them right away. Come Monday morning, I drop the documents off at our own version of the correspondence office, and the following conversation ensues. Our correspondence lady says, "Oh, would you look at that? Those lazy people at the other building, thinking they're so special." She then dials an internal phone number of department so-and-so, and she says on the phone, "The other building's response that you've been waiting for is finally here. They took their sweet time. Yes, they did." Yes, I know, the deadline expired on Friday. Their official response is registered as being received on today's business day. Yes, I'm positive. She then turns to me and says, "Oh, once the chairman hears about this, how heads will roll there. Oh my." Update. So due to an overwhelming interest in the ultimate fate of Karen, I've decided to provide. And please don't get your hopes up. If I'd known what exactly happened to her, I would have said that in the first place. On the level of staff, 99% of interaction between our institutions is done through written correspondence, and while I do have access to the other building's phone directory, it's not the one they use themselves internally, and only has very senior staff members, so Karen was never in it in the first place. However, I figured out a way to gather some circumstantial evidence for you. So the way bureaucracy works around here, most external and even internal for that matter, is documents have the name of the person who prepared it, printed in a smaller size font, either on the front or on the back. And once the document is registered in our system, that person's name is also entered and stored. In fact, that's how I learned Karen's name in the first place. She was the one responsible for the document she wanted delivered. And remember, she only told me her position, not her name. So I did some searches, and here's the result. Her last name appears sporadically in the database before summer of the year this happened, when the story took place. But not a single document received by us has her name on record after a certain point later that year, and all the way to today's date. Now personally, I don't for a second think she was fired. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to fire a government employee around here, even more so at top-level institutions like ours, where all the laws are followed strictly to the letter. You either have to mishandle state secrets or otherwise seriously break the law to achieve that. What I believe did happen, however, is that missing the deadline on our precept is considered quite major indeed, and it got her in hot water. The result of that, quite probably, got her sufficiently demoted that she no longer works with any kind of outgoing documentation whatsoever. This is further evidenced by the time passed from our memorable encounter to the last document registered in our system with her name mentioned on file. 6 weeks. That's about how much time it takes for the performance review board to convene, and the following reassignment paperwork to be completed in our organization too. So yes, she was probably demoted. That was some sweet, satisfying karma, wasn't it? And I hope that Karen learned a lesson. Like, using your position of power to harass others like that is such an a-hole move, and I'm glad she got demoted. And seriously, if that document was so freaking important and the deadline was that day, why not hand-deliver the documents yourself, instead of, again, harassing some low-level employee to do it for you? But I guess she was above doing stuff like that, right? Which ultimately resulted in her losing her very important position. And here's a question. How many of you would have flashed your very important government ID to that Karen right then and there to put her in her place in that moment? I would have loved to see the look of horror and embarrassment on her face. Like, imagine a sergeant unknowingly giving orders and harassing a colonel. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I recently went to the store, and this store is a popular chain in my area. Most of the employees wear reddish polo shirts with black aprons or vests over them, and I encountered a Karen. Let me explain. I was picking up some ingredients for a bake sale going on at the grade school my girls attend. My wife was not only the organizer, but she was baking 4 items to include in the sale. She was at home prepping cookies and brownies, and I was sent to get more essentials like sugar and frosting. In the baking aisle, I was kneeling down to reach a large bag of sugar that are always on the bottom shelf. I was reaching towards the back of the bottom shelf since there weren't many bags left. While doing this, I was being careful not to overexert my right hand, since I recently had to get stitches and it still hurt. I accidentally sliced myself with a box cutter, if you're wondering. And that's when I hear a high-pitched voice say, "I'll find it my effing self, you morons!" Now, I thought the voice was unnecessarily loud, but I didn't give it a second thought, as I just grabbed the bag of sugar and put it inside my cart. That's when the woman marches up to me and she grabs it out of my cart. The woman puts it in her own cart and she says, "Great, I don't have to go looking for it now." And before I could react, the woman happily walked away. There was nothing for me to do but shake my head, bend down again, and start the process over to get the last bag of sugar. After getting the butter and eggs from the back of the store, I went through condiments to get to the front. The moment I entered the aisle, I saw the same woman. I wanted to see if she would say anything as I walked by, but she was occupied with another customer. The woman screamed at him and said, "Sir." Now, this woman's voice was so loud and piercing, it made me stop in my tracks for a moment. She says to him, "Come here. Could you help me reach the ketchup? I need ketchup." She then points to the top shelves that held the larger sizes of ketchup bottles. At this point, she didn't see me yet. She was speaking to an elderly gentleman who was walking with the aid of a cane. She exclaims, "They're too far back." The man says to her, "I wish I could help you, but I don't think I'll have any more luck than you." The man wasn't much taller than the woman. She then screams again and says, "But I can't reach the ketchup, and I need it." At this point, fearing that she wouldn't leave the man alone or would go crazy or something, I step in and I say, "I'll get the ketchup for you, ma'am." The woman looks over her shoulder at me and then turns back to the old gentleman, and she says, "I'll let the employee get it." Again, her voice was so loud. I say to her, "I'm not an employee, ma'am, but I'll help you get the ketchup." She then says, "Do you work here?" I reply, "No." She then says, "Well, why do you want the ketchup?" I tell her, "I don't want any ketchup. I'm trying to help you." She says, "I need ketchup." She then points to the top shelf again, and I say, "I know you need ketchup," failing to hide the frustration in my voice. So I grabbed the bottle that she appeared to be pointing at, and I tried to hand the bottle to her, but she looked at it in my hand, and she screams, "That's not big enough. I need the big ketchup." At this point, I sighed, and I put the bottle back before picking up a 64-ounce bottle. The woman then whined and said, "The lid is on top." I asked, thoroughly confused, "What?" She says, "The lid is on top of the ketchup. I need the ketchup with the lid on the bottom." At this point I say, "You said you wanted the big one. There's only two choices, a 64-ounce bottle with the lid on top, or a 32-ounce bottle with an inverted lid." She just screams and says, "I need the bigger ketchup with the lid on the bottom." It's at this point I summon the patience that I didn't know I had. And I tell the woman, "Perhaps you should get 2 of the 32-ounce bottles with the lid on the bottom." I then put the larger bottle back and picked up the inverted ketchup bottle. However, when I held the bottle out for her to take, the woman stared at it. So I just put it in her cart, next to the large bag of sugar she stole from me, and then grabbed a second bottle. This one she took from me, and she screamed, "I need the big ketchup. This isn't the big one. I need the big ketchup." At this point, she drew the attention of the entire store, including several employees that curiously looked on from the end of the aisle. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't think I can help you with your ketchup problem anymore." As I reached for my cart, the woman throws the bottle of ketchup at my face. I reacted by deflecting it away with my sutured hand, and I screamed in pain, "Ow!" The bottle went flying into the shelf behind me, and ketchup sprays all over the products on the shelf. The lid of the bottle had cracked, and it broke off on impact. The woman had grabbed another bottle, and she was ready to throw it, when out of nowhere, we hear, "What's going on here?" A woman, who appeared to be the manager, steps up from behind the other employees. At this point, Karen yells, "He doesn't work here." The manager says, "Ma'am, calm down. You need to tell me." The woman then starts pointing at me saying, "He acts like he works here, but he doesn't work here. Employees should help the customers. He doesn't work here." I just tried to ignore the lady and inspected my hand. It was painful, but no serious damage. The manager said calmly, "No, he doesn't work here." Karen goes on screaming, saying, Well, he followed me through the store and pretended to work here. That's when the elderly gentleman chimes in and he says that's not true. He offered to help her. He explained that he doesn't work here after she asked him. Karen says he kept trying to give me the wrong ketchup. The man in the cane continued on and said that man was being as helpful as he could. She wasn't being reasonable. The manager then saw me looking at my hand and she asked, "Are you hurt?" I tell her I'll be fine. I'm sorry for the mess. This is when one of the other employees stepped close to the manager and they spoke in a low voice. The employee said, "That woman threw the bottle at him. We all saw it." The manager says, "Take him and his stuff to customer service and wait for me. If he needs anything for his hand, get it for him." The employee then took hold of my cart and asked me to follow him. As I left the aisle, the woman asked, "Are you kicking him out? Because you should. He's pretending to work here." At the customer service desk up front, I asked for ice for my hand, and the employee promptly provided it. The customer service clerk asked us what happened, and I start explaining when out of nowhere, I hear Karen screaming saying, "He should be kicked out for pretending to work here." A moment later, the elderly man with the cane walks to the front, and he sat on the bench beside me, and he said, "That woman is crazy." At this point, 2 cops come in the store, and they follow an employee to the condiments aisle. I then say, I have to call my wife. I'm supposed to get this stuff for the bake sale to her, and it looks like it might take a while. The customer service clerk, hearing that, says, "Is that the school bake sale?" I respond, "Yes. Do you know it?" She says, "My daughter goes to that school." I respond, "Really? My wife's organizing the bake sale." At this point, the call connects and my wife picks up. I explained to her what happened and that it might take longer than expected before I'm home. However, I had to cut my call short when one police officer starts asking me questions. The manager arrived at customer service while I was talking to the officer. Once he was done, she profusely apologized and offered me a discount for all my items. I tell her that really isn't necessary. It wasn't your fault. The manager said, "Are you sure?" And this is when the clerk spoke up and said, "This stuff is actually for the school bake sale. His wife's the organizer." Manager says, "Oh, well, if you don't take the discount, I think we can donate some baked goods from our bakery." I tell her that would be great. She then says, "Have your wife call me as soon as possible. We'll work something out." The clerk then rang up my items and asked if I needed anything else. That's when the manager said, "Wait." She then walked over and she issues a gift card for just over the amount of my total and used it to pay for the groceries. During that time, the cop interviewed the old man. When he was done, the old man asked, "What happened to the lady?" Manager responds, "She's been banned from the store," and she walked away with the officer. We both watched as the second officer escorts the lady out of the store, as the manager and the first officer followed. What a wild story that was, and all over freaking KETCHUP, hey? And honestly, that woman seemed like she wasn't in her right mind at all, because who explodes like that over the wrong size bottle of ketchup? Absolutely uncalled for. Guys, let me know what you think of the post. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/IDontWorkHereLady. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these wild Karen stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where a psycho boss won't allow OP to quit, and the episode is just wild. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.